Now today, Year 2, we're going to start our clay topic, and in this topic we're going to learn a variety of different ways that we can use clay. And so we call those clay techniques, okay? And today we're going to have a go at making a few different models. Now I know that because some of you are online this week, it means that you haven't got any clay, so you can use salt dough. And this is salt dough, and on the Firefly task it shows you how to make salt dough, so you can have that ready for the lesson. I'm going to model what to do in clay today, but salt dough will work in exactly the same way. So please know that the salt dough will work exactly the same, and you need to do the same techniques with both. So let me move my owls and my snails out of the way. This is the equipment you will need. You will need your clay or your Play-Doh, your salt dough. You'll need a pot with some water in it. You'll need a rolling pin. Now at school, you will be using what we call rolling guides. These ensure that you don't roll the clay too thin. Now at home you won't have any of these, but you just need to be careful that you don't roll it too the Play-Doh too thin, or the clay. You need a knife. This is a clay tool, but if you don't have a clay tool, you can use a knife, a very blunt knife, or a pencil, or something that will cut. And then you also need a pair of scissors. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our clay and unwrap it from the cling film. And I just want you to just give it a squeeze and see what it's like, and see if you can mold it with your hands. It moves quite easily. Now clay, if you leave it in the air and you don't wrap it up in cling film or something, it goes really hard because the air makes it hard. Also, if you keep touching the clay too much, it also goes hard and dry. And when it goes dry, it cracks. So you need to soften it a little bit and then just leave it. And what you're going to do is you're going to either break it into two pieces like that, or you can use your clay tool to cut it into two pieces. And you're just going to, for now, take one of those pieces of clay, and you're going to make a snail. And when we make a snail, can you see I've made a spiral shape like this, and I've rolled out the clay. Now rolling out the clay like this and making a spiral shape has a special name when we're using clay. It's called a coil. And I'm going to show you first how to make a coil and how to do coiling. So what you need to do is you need to break your piece of clay into one small bit and one large bit. And the first thing you need to do is to make your clay into a sausage shape. Okay, nice long sausage shape. And then you're going to roll the clay backwards and forwards. Now, if you just roll it forwards, it won't work. You need to roll the clay backwards and forwards, pressing down to make it thinner. And you need to make sure that you roll the whole piece of clay. You can't just roll in the middle, because look what happens to the ends. It's not even. When you roll the clay, you need to do it evenly. Okay? So you're going to roll it one bit at a time, and then move your hand. Roll the middle, then move your hand to the end. Roll the end backwards and forwards, and then move your hand to the end. And keep going until your sausage, or what we call coil, is about as thick as your thumb. Okay? And you want it to be smooth all over. Okay, so you want to make sure it's a nice even sausage shape just by keeping rolling that clay. Now when you have this is what we call the coil, and you want it to be the same thickness all over. So once you've made your coil, you need to start to roll it up. Now if you bend the clay too quickly, it will break. So you need to do it slowly, bit by bit, coil up the clay. Okay, and you're rolling it into a spiral to make the snail shape. Now you want it to stand up, so you need to press it down on the paper. And can you see in my clay I have a little crack? So what I need to do to make sure I don't have cracks is I need to dip my finger in water and just smooth over any cracks that form in the clay. Okay, and it's the same for the salt dough. Okay, now you've made a coil, that's one technique you've learned, and now you're going to learn how to pinch your clay. So let me just smooth that clay down a little bit there. So pinching is when you use your thumb and your finger and you pinch the clay into shape. So I'm going to make some little antennae for my tail at the front, for my snail at the front. Okay, and then I'm going to make some pinch patterns all along the top of the snail like this. Okay, now another technique is to use your clay tool or your knife to just add some detail. So I'm just going to make some eyes on the top of my snail, and I'm going to add some patterns all around the side of the snail. Okay, so I keep going round. You can add any patterns, you can add circles, you can add spirals. It's up to you to decide. So you can decorate your snail in any way you like. And the last thing will be to write your name on the bottom, so everyone knows who's made it using your clay tool. So you've learnt how to do a coil, you've learnt how to pinch, and you've learnt how to use your clay tool to make pattern. Okay, the next step is to take your other piece of clay or your Play-Doh to make this owl. And to make the owl, what we need to do is just leave a little bit of the clay left. And if you're at school, you'll take your rolling guides like these and place the clay in the middle. If you don't have rolling guides at home, that's fine. You can just roll out the clay. Just make sure it doesn't get too thin. Now the rolling guides help us to ensure that we don't roll the clay too thin. So we need to be rolling onto the clay rolling guides, and it means that the clay cannot get any smaller. Okay, it can't get any thinner, because if it got thinner it would be too thin, and once it dried the clay would break. So you're going to then cut out the shape of the owl. Now my clay is actually a good shape for the owl already, but you cut out the edge using your clay tool. And once you've rolled out clay, we call what you have made a tile. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so I've made my tile, and now I'm going to add some eyes. I'm going to take a piece of the clay that's left over, shape the eye into a circle, so shape the clay into a circle, and then I need to stick it to the owl's body. Now the thing about clay is if you just put it on like that, when the clay dries it will just fall off and your model will not stay together. So we have to do a technique called scratch and slip, and this is how we do it. We take our clay tool and we cut lines and then crosses into the clay. Then you think about where you're going to put the clay on the tile, and you cut lines and crosses into that as well. And this helps the clay to stick together, a bit like Lego has bumps in it to help it stick together with the other piece. Clay, once you cut into it, it sticks together more easily. Then I'm going to put my finger in the water and rub my finger over the two bits of clay, and this makes a sort of glue, and we call it slip, and it helps things to stick together. Then I'm going to cut the pattern back into all those pieces, and then I can stick the two together, and when it dries the two pieces will not fall apart. Let me show you again. I take the piece of clay, I make it into the round shape that I want. I then scratch in those patterns onto the piece of clay and onto the tile. I use my finger in the water to create a glue, which we call slip. I then cut in those patterns again, and now this should hold the piece of clay together. Okay, I'm just going to make my eye just a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to put an eye shape in the middle, and this should now stick together. You will also need to make the ears of the owl, so you make little pointed shapes like this, and again you will need to scratch and slip the edges so that they stick. So put your slip on, scratch in that pattern again into both sides and stick it on. Okay, and just mold it around the bottom to make sure the two bits stick together really well, so there are no gaps in the clay. Okay, once you've done the ears, the last thing to do is to make the feathers and the beak. Okay, now the beak you do in exactly the same way. Make it into, take a small piece of clay, form it into a V shape, scratch it on the back so it sticks, scratch your clay tile, put water on to make a glue, water on both bits, scratch again, scratch again, and then stick the two parts on and just mold it around flat so it sticks. Okay, and then the last stage is to make the feathers, and we just do that by cutting into the clay with a pair of scissors, and it makes that pattern on the top of the clay. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how you are using the clay and the Play-Doh this week. So don't forget to send me pictures to show me. Can't wait to see. And yes, remember, don't let the clay get too dry, and keep it nice and thick so it doesn't break when it dries. Okay, good luck you two.